Day 2 on the tools. I get a bit more of this quad dismantled.
Well, I've removed the brake drum, which was quite stuck, and I was fighting with it last night. And then I remembered somewhere there was talk about some way of releasing the pressure on the shoes. And I went back to the climber manual and looked at front brakes section, and it referred to chapter 10, which is about the front suspension and steering. It talked about removing the hubs, the brake drums. And in that section, it talked about a hole here next to the pin that's got the spring clip on it that holds the brake shoe in place. There's a hole next to it there, which has a little rubber bung in it. And it says to push your screwdriver in there and it will release the pressure on the shoes. And from my knowledge of how the brake shoes were fitted, I couldn't see how that worked, but I've sort of come round to understanding a bit more about it. David O'Neill posted something about the little lever that where it should be placed in relation to the spring clip that's on this pin, and the lever should be on this side of that spring clip. Well, when you press through this hole, it presses on the spring clip that's on this pin, and it lets the lever that's over here being held back like a stop to swing over this way. And in swinging over this way, I think it's actually a lever that points down from the top. When the lever swings over this way, because it gets past the stop, which is the part of the spring, it gets past, you press on there, on which pushes on the spring clip, and it lets that lever swing over this way. And in the process of swinging over this way, it releases the tension on the brake pads. So I hear a lot of people fighting, trying to get the brake pad, the hubs off, bashing on the axle and really causing a mess to the rim and everything, trying to get the brake drums off. Well, this helped me. It was part of a number of things I was doing. I was levering and heating and a number of things, but yeah, this was the key to getting it to come apart. So with the brake drum off, I'm pretty happy with what I see behind here. There's plenty of material still left on the shoes. The actual rubbers on the wheel cylinder look in good nick. I actually haven't tried the brake master cylinder and to push these out. I'll worry about that when I come to reassemble things, but what I wanted to do in releasing this wheel was I want to put the wheel back on and for this corner to roll, because it was completely locked up. And once you've got the hub off, you can get a screwdriver in here to release the little mechanism, the self-adjusting mechanism, which retracts the shoes a lot right back to their minimum size. And now I can fit the brake drum on there with no rubbing at all. And that's what I want. If I went up and if I put the brake drum on and then operated the master cylinder, that would push these cylinders out if it's actually still working, and the self-adjuster would take up, and I'd be back in a situation where the shoes are out too close to the drum to be working. The actual lever that I pressed on is down in there. It's I've put it back on the inside of the stop. It's that part right in the middle of the screen there, and it swings over to the outside when you press through that hole, and you're pressing on the bottom of this clip here. The lever in down the side there is then capable of swinging over this way, somehow releasing the tension on the self-adjusting mechanism. So hopefully that may help others in future, but got me out of trouble this time. So all I'm going to do now is put the drum back on. It'll spin freely because the self-adjuster hasn't taken up any of the slack, and this wheel will roll for me. I want to put a wheel on so I can roll the whole bike outside and get a pressure washer going on to get some of the mud off. The actual tray underneath the motor is just loaded. It's got at least an inch thicker sandy soil material on there, as well as some of this bloody oil soaked material that's around the bike. But this front hub, I'm guessing that's an original, well, unless it's been rebuilt by somebody in recent times. I think this is starting to look like a bike that's only done under 4,000 kilometres, which is running around a vineyard. Why would you be using the brakes much at all? So anyway, I'll keep going. So I've got the wheels back on it, about to lower the back down to the ground. I'm going to wheel it outside and give it a pressure wash. Try to clear the inch of mud off the rear under tray. Well, I blasted at least another couple of shovelfuls of dirt off this thing. You can't get everywhere with the pressure washer, but I suppose anything that comes off is better than nothing. Better if you've got the wheels off while you're doing it. I can see places I've missed. There's a heap of oily mud around the recoil starter, and I noticed the recoil starter hasn't got a handle on it, so it's been damaged. One of the few things I've found broken. So I'll leave it out here over lunchtime and see how much of this water runs off it, and drag it back into the shed and hoist it up again. Keep tearing bits off it. The wheels cleaned up pretty nice. Any dirt that's left there is probably where I've almost missed with the blaster, but there's a bit of rust on the rim there at the front. The rear rims and the other front rim are good. I've got it back up in the air after its pressure wash, and it's time to start stripping it down from the top. I'm going to take the heat shield off, the airbox off, release these cables at the top, take this control bracket away, and then release these cables here, and probably take the carburettor off and work towards removing those control cables on top of the engine. By that stage I can remove this rubber, and we're getting down towards the wiring loom at that stage. The wiring loom will be probably the next thing after all those other things have gone. Another minor problem with this bike is the brass fitting at the end of the throttle cable's missing. That means I might have to be making something like that up in the lathe. That's not really a huge problem, I can do that. Just got to get the throttle cable out. It's still hung up in that orifice there. I don't know whether it's been used by that. The fact that this cover was missing might mean it's just another thing that's frustrated the owner of this bike and convinced him to abandon it and buy a new one. So I'm the winner out of that, so I can't be too upset by little problems like this. Another issue I'm having is the choke, or I think they call it the enricher or starter cable. the plunger is stuck in the casting. I've been able to remove this 12mm threaded part, but that should let the brass plunger slide out. The spring's there. Can't release the cable unless the brass plunger comes, so I've poured a bit of CRC in there, and hopefully that will release so that I can take this carby away, and it's at least out of the way for now. These choke and throttle cables are running over the top of this block, which indicates to me they've probably been replaced and not routed properly when they've replaced them. But otherwise the carby looks pretty good. It seems quite clean, which would make sense if somebody has had a problem with it. And I've got the side cover for it. I found that in the storage box that was on the back of the bike. Now this snorkel here has got this hole in it, which I've seen a few times before. I think both these bikes I've just bought had holes here. I think that's possibly where the seat rubs. And it gets brittle and rubs a hole through there. I've repaired at least one of those in the past. So I'm going to continue now removing these cables from the control block here, and take the control block out and the snorkel. This is the transfer box shift lever. I've just removed the cable that ran to that. It bolted through bolt here, 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 and there. So the whole bracket fitted in there, and I released the lever off the spline there, and that meant that the cable that went up to there could be removed completely from the bike or the top of the engine. I'm now, because I'm sitting here, going to remove the recall starter that doesn't have a handle on it, and it had a heap of mud, or I think oil-soaked dirt all around there, that I spent a lot of time with the pressure washer trying to get that to move. There's more of it there that is needing to be scraped off. It's quite a mess in and around there. There's been a oil leak or something at the end of the crankshaft, so I'm going to remove that. Recall starter so that we can see what we can see. I see there's a screw missing there already. Yeah, I'm going to get that out of the way and scratch a bit of dirt away. The carburettor is still sitting here because I can't get that choke cable removed. I may have to remove the choke cable at the handlebar and leave it soak and get that carburettor to release that brass fitting, the brass plunger that's in there. It's solid at the moment. That's the recall starter removed. It's quite clean inside and out. Inside at least, the inner and the outer part. There's a little bit of a rubber ring. I thought it might have been a spring out of an oil seal, but it doesn't look like that. Laying in there. The paper gasket was fairly intact, it appeared. There was one screw missing. It's a bit of a mystery as to what delivered all of this stuck on dirt all around it, because it doesn't really appear like it's come out of the recoil starter. And there's a seal on the end of the crankshaft behind that cup, which could deposit a bit of oil. I see a little bit of it on other bikes, but nothing like I see here. Makes me think it didn't come from here. This is the reverse lever, the 5-speed sequential levers down the bottom there. This is the bracket that holds the cables for those two levers. I've got them out of the way. There's tons of dirt and muck all in and around there. Don't know where the oil's coming from. I've removed the starter motor from here, took the lead off and the two screws out the end of the starter motor, and just pulled it out. It's a Mitsuba starter motor that looks in pretty good nick. Doesn't really appear that that's the source also of all the oil, because if they leak there, but it's just another item out of the way. The side of the motor now has the recoil starter removed. I've unplugged bits of the wiring loom. This is the stator unplugged from here. This is the pneumatic fan unplugged from there. And yeah, the cable ties that are used on the Suzuki are all sort of reusable style ones. So I've made a collection of those. The exhaust will be the first job tomorrow. Bolts here and here and up here, all ones that corrode in place. And I'll, rather than shear them off, I'll try a bit of heat on them, because they're not moving by themselves at the moment. There's bolts here, and then there's and here for the heat shield that wraps around. So the whole, to get the exhaust out, you got to take this piece of frame out, and you got to do all of that to get the muffler off. So that's probably a job for tomorrow, to get the muffler and everything else out from this side, hopefully without shearing too many bolts off.
I'm not sure where all this oil and muck's coming from, but it's a bit of a worry. Anyhow, get out to your shed and have some fun.